I stared at the pregnancy test in disbelief, my hands trembling as two pink lines came into focus. After 5 years of trying, countless disappointments, and one devastating miscarriage, here it was, positive. The irony wasn't lost on me that this moment came right after the biggest fight Marcus and I had ever had. My name is Ellie, and this should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, I was sitting on our bathroom floor, mascara streaked down my face, still processing the words Marcus had hurled at me just hours earlier. "Maybe this is for the best," he'd said, pacing our kitchen like a caged animal. "We're not in the right place for a family anymore, Ellie. My firm's about to make partner decisions, and you're always wrapped up in your cases. Let's be realistic." I'd thrown my wine glass into the sink, shattering it. "Realistic? We've been trying for 5 years, Marcus. 5 years of temperature tracking, fertility treatments, and scheduled sex. Now you decide it's not the right time." The bathroom tiles were cold against my legs as I pulled out my phone. My finger hovered over Marcus's name before scrolling to my sister Lydia instead. She answered on the first ring. "Hey sis, what's wrong?" Her voice was warm, concerned. "I'm pregnant." The words came out in a whisper. "Oh my God, Ellie. That's..." She paused, probably remembering our conversation about Marcus from last week. "How are you feeling?" I laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "Terrified. Marcus just told me he doesn't want kids anymore. He doesn't know yet." "That absolute..." Lydia caught herself. "What are you going to do?" Through the bathroom door, I heard Marcus come home, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floors. My heart raced as I remembered the pregnancy test still sitting on the counter. "He's home," I whispered. "I have to go." "Wait, Ellie." I ended the call just as Marcus knocked on the bathroom door. "Ellie? Look, about earlier. I'm sorry. I've been under a lot of pressure at work, and I shouldn't have taken it out on you." My eyes fixed on the test. In all our years together, I'd never kept a secret from him. But something in my gut told me to wait, to protect this fragile new reality until I figured out what to do. "I'll be out in a minute," I called, quickly wrapping the test in toilet paper and burying it in the trash. As I stood up, I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, eyes red-rimmed, but somehow different. Stronger, maybe, or just more desperate. Either way, I knew nothing would ever be the same after today. The first wave of nausea hit me during a client meeting at work. I barely made it to the bathroom, my hand pressed against my still flat stomach. 3 weeks had passed since I'd discovered the pregnancy, and I still hadn't told Marcus. Every time I tried, something stopped me. His late nights at the office, his distracted responses to my attempts at conversation. The way he'd started taking calls in another room. "You look like hell," Lydia said when she picked me up from work. I'd called her after nearly fainting in the break room. "Have you told him yet?" I shook my head, watching the city blur past my window. "He's barely home anymore. When he is, he's either on his phone or sleeping on the couch. You need to see a doctor, Ellie. This isn't just about you anymore." She was right, of course. But making that appointment felt like crossing a line, making this real in a way I wasn't sure I was ready for. The house was dark when Lydia dropped me off. No surprise there. I found Marcus's note on the kitchen counter. "Working late. Don't wait up." The paper crumpled in my fist as another wave of nausea hit me. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Hi Ellie, this is Grace from Marcus's office. He left his phone at work, and I noticed you'd called several times. He's in an important meeting with the partners until late tonight. Just wanted to let you know he's okay." Something about her message made my skin crawl. The exclamation point, maybe, or the fact that she had my number at all. I was still staring at the message when Marcus came home around midnight. He smelled like scotch and expensive perfume. Not mine. "You're still up," he said, loosening his tie. "Everything okay?" "I made an appointment with Dr. Bennett for tomorrow morning," I said, watching his face carefully. "I'd like you to come with me." He froze, one shoe half off. "Bennett? The fertility specialist?" "Ellie, we talked about this. The timing isn't. I'm pregnant." The words hung between us like smoke. Marcus sat heavily on our bed, his face unreadable. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks. His voice rose sharply. "And you didn't tell me? Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly. "Would you have suddenly started coming home? Stopped taking mysterious late meetings? Stopped letting Grace text your wife about your whereabouts?" His head snapped up at Grace's name, and in that moment, I saw everything I needed to know. My hand instinctively moved to protect my stomach as Marcus started to speak, but I was already walking out of the room. I had a doctor's appointment in the morning, and I knew now I'd be going alone. I never meant to end up at Marcus's office that afternoon. Dr. Bennett had just confirmed I was 12 weeks along, and despite the morning sickness and fatigue, everything looked healthy. I wanted to share this one piece of good news with my husband, even if things between us were strained. The receptionist's face fell when she saw me. "Oh, Mrs. Whitman, Marcus is in a meeting with Grace." They asked not to be disturbed. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "Which conference room?" "Mrs. Whitman, I really can't." But I was already walking past her desk, my heels clicking against the marble floor. I knew this building well, too well. How many dinner parties and firm events had I attended here, playing the role of the perfect lawyer's wife? I heard them before I saw them. Marcus's low laugh, followed by Grace's voice, intimate and soft. The conference room door was ajar, and through the gap, I saw them sitting close together on the leather couch, heads bent over some papers. "You can't keep avoiding her," Grace was saying. "The pregnancy changes everything." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was stressed. "I know, but every time I look at her, I see everything I'm about to lose. The partnership, the freedom, all of it. You could always choose differently." Grace's hand rested on his knee. "Nothing's set in stone." I must have made a sound because they both looked up. The color drained from Marcus's face. "Ellie." I held up my hand, the ultrasound picture still clutched in it. "Dr. Bennett says everything looks perfect. Thought you'd want to know, since you couldn't make it this morning. But I see you had more important matters to discuss. With your colleague." Grace stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like my husband's been discussing our marriage with you instead of me. It looks like you're giving him permission to abandon his child." My voice was steady, surprising even me. "How long?" "Ellie, please." Marcus started toward me, but I backed away. "How long?" "6 months," he whispered. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 6 months. Right around when we'd started our last round of fertility treatments. While I was injecting hormones and tracking temperatures, my husband was falling in love with someone else. I placed the ultrasound picture on the conference table. "I'll have my sister pick up my things tomorrow. Don't worry about the baby, Marcus. You've made it clear where your priorities lie." As I walked out head high, I heard Grace ask, "Are you going after her?" His silence was the only answer I needed. Lydia's art studio became my sanctuary in the weeks that followed. The smell of paint and turpentine masked my constant nausea, and the chaos of her workspace matched my scattered thoughts. I'd moved in temporarily, sleeping on her pull-out couch while divorce papers sat unsigned on her kitchen counter. Marcus called again, Lydia said one morning, watching me pick at my toast. "Says he can't reach you on your cell." "That's because I blocked him." I rubbed my growing belly, now visible under my loose shirt. "Did he mention if he's signed the papers yet?" "He wants to talk first. Says there are things you don't understand." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "What's not to understand?" He had an affair while I was trying to get pregnant, then told his girlfriend she could help him decide whether to abandon his child. The studio door chimed, and Dr. Bennett walked in, looking out of place among Lydia's abstract paintings. My heart dropped. He wasn't supposed to have my test results for another week. "I tried calling," he said, his face grave. "There are some complications we need to discuss." The world tilted sideways as he explained. Elevated proteins concerning markers increased risks. Words like monitoring and specialist care floated around me while Lydia gripped my hand. "The baby?" I managed to ask. "Could be fine, but we need to be vigilant. You'll need weekly appointments, possibly bed rest later on. Do you have someone who can help you manage this?" Before I could answer, the studio door chimed again. Marcus stood there, his suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. My throat closed up at the sight of him. "I came to drop these off," he said, holding up the signed divorce papers. Then he saw Dr. Bennett and froze. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "You lost the right to know." I started, but Dr. Bennett cut in. "Actually, Mrs. Whitman, given the situation, having a support system will be crucial." Marcus stepped forward, his face pale. "Ellie, please. Let me help." "Like you helped by discussing our marriage with Grace? Or by avoiding every appointment until now?" "Grace and I ended things," he said quietly. "The day you left. I realized. I was running away from everything that mattered because I was terrified of failing as a father. But I'm more terrified of not being there at all." I looked at his outstretched hand, then at the divorce papers. The choice felt impossible. Trust the man who betrayed me, or face this crisis alone. Dr. Bennett's words echoed in my head. "The baby needs you to be strong." But what did being strong really mean? The delivery room was a blur of monitors and urgent voices. After 36 hours of labor, Nora came into the world silent, too silent. I caught a glimpse of her tiny face before they whisked her away, Marcus trailing behind the medical team like a ghost. "Something's wrong with her heart," he said when he returned, his voice hollow. "They're running tests." I reached for his hand, but he stepped back, checking his phone. Even now, he was keeping his distance. The space between us felt like an ocean. Dr. Bennett appeared hours later, his face grim. "The initial tests show a severe congenital heart defect. She'll need immediate surgery, and the prognosis." He paused, glancing between us. "It's not good." Marcus's phone buzzed. Grace's name flashed across the screen. "Take it," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Obviously, it's important." He silenced the phone but didn't meet my eyes. "This isn't the time." "When is the time, Marcus?" "When our daughter is fighting for her life. When the doctors are asking us to make impossible decisions. Or when you're getting comfort from your girlfriend instead of supporting your wife." "That's not fair." "Fair." I tried to sit up, ignoring the pain. "What's not fair is that while I was on bed rest, terrified of losing our baby, you were building your escape plan. What's not fair is that you're still doing it now." A nurse appeared with forms requiring both our signatures for Nora's surgery. Marcus stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. "I can't do this," he whispered. I'm not strong enough for this kind of responsibility." "Then go," I said, signing the papers with trembling hands. "But understand something, if you walk out that door, don't come back. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when it's convenient. Nora deserves better than a father who runs when things get hard." He stood there, phone buzzing again in his hand, tears tracking down his face. For a moment, I thought he might prove me wrong, might finally choose us over his fears. Instead, he placed his unsigned forms on the bed. "I'm sorry, Ellie. I never wanted any of this." As he walked away, Dr. Bennett stepped in. "Mrs. Whitman, we need to prep Nora for surgery now. Are you ready?" I looked at the empty doorway where my husband had disappeared, then at the forms that would determine my daughter's fate. In that moment, something inside me hardened into steel. "It's just Miss Whitman now," I said, finishing the signatures. "And yes, I'm ready. Tell me everything I need to know to save my daughter." 5 months after Nora's surgery, I stood in our new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and the steady beep of her heart monitor. The place was smaller than our old house, but it was ours. No memories of Marcus, no ghost of what could have been. "She's getting stronger," Dr. Bennett said during our follow-up appointment. The initial diagnosis was actually more severe than her condition warranted. With proper care, she could live a completely normal life. I should have felt relieved. Instead, anger burned in my chest. All that fear, all that drama, and Marcus had abandoned us over a misdiagnosis. "Have you considered telling him?" Dr. Bennett asked carefully. "He made his choice," I said, watching Nora sleep in her carrier. "He doesn't get to walk back in just because things are easier now." The universe, however, had other plans. That evening, while picking up dinner, I ran straight into Grace at the local cafe. She looked different, tired, less polished. "Ellie," she said, her voice catching. "I've been trying to find a way to reach out." "Don't," I warned, but she pressed on. "Marcus is a mess. He lost the partnership, he's drinking. I ended things months ago, but he's spiraling. He keeps saying he made the biggest mistake of his life." "Good." I snapped, but my voice wavered. "He should feel terrible. He abandoned his dying daughter." Grace's face fell. "Dying? But I thought." The firm's insurance statements showed ongoing treatment, not hospice care. My blood ran cold. He'd been monitoring Nora's medical records through the insurance company. "That's none of his business anymore," I said, but Grace wasn't listening. She was staring at Nora, who had woken up and was babbling happily. "She looks perfect," Grace whispered. "Does Marcus know?" I grabbed our order and turned to leave, but Grace caught my arm. "I know I'm the last person who should give advice, but revenge isn't going to heal either of you. And that little girl deserves to know her father, even if he failed both of you." "Failed us?" I laughed bitterly. "He didn't just fail. He destroyed everything we built, everything we dreamed of. And now that things are better, you think he deserves another chance?" "No," Grace said quietly. "I think Nora deserves every chance at happiness, even if that means forgiving the unforgivable." I looked down at my daughter, her father's eyes staring back at me. The weight of Grace's words settled heavy on my shoulders, along with a truth I'd been avoiding. In protecting Nora from Marcus's rejection, was I also denying her something essential? The question followed me home, echoing through our empty apartment like an accusation. I didn't expect to find Marcus sitting on the steps of our apartment building, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Nora was asleep in my arms after her latest checkup, and seeing him there made my protective instincts flare. "You can't be here," I said, but he didn't move. I saw the updated medical reports. His voice was rough. "She's healthy. She was always healthy, wasn't she? You lost the right to know anything about her the day you walked out." He stood, swaying slightly. "I deserve that. But Ellie, I've lost everything else. The partnership, my reputation, Grace." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Just let me explain." "Keep your voice down," I warned as Nora stirred. "She's sleeping." His eyes fixed on her face, and something broke in his expression. "She looks like you. She has your eyes," I said before I could stop myself. "Not that you stayed long enough to notice." "I was a coward," he whispered. "When they said her heart was failing, all I could think about was how I'd fail her, just like my father failed me. So I ran. But I've been watching, following her progress through the insurance reports, hoping. Hoping what? That she'd die so you wouldn't have to face what you did? Or that she'd live, so you could waltz back in and play daddy when it was convenient? Hoping I could find the courage to face both of you again." Nora's eyes fluttered open, and she stared at Marcus with innocent curiosity. My heart clenched. "Duh," she mumbled sleepily, and I watched Marcus's face crumple. "You don't get to cry," I said, my voice sharp. "You don't get to feel sorry for yourself. Do you know how many nights I sat in the hospital, terrified and alone? How many milestones you missed? How many times she's asked about you? Tell me how to make it right," he pleaded. "You can't. That's the point, Marcus. Some things can't be fixed with legal settlements or carefully worded apologies. Some betrayals leave permanent scars." Nora reached out toward him, and I instinctively stepped back. The movement seemed to wake something in Marcus, a determination I hadn't seen since our early days together. "Then let me earn it back," he said. "Not your trust or forgiveness. I know those are gone. But let me earn the right to know my daughter. To be in her life, even if it's just as a distant father who doesn't deserve her." I looked at Nora, then back at Marcus. The truth was, I'd been waiting for this moment, not to forgive him, but to decide what kind of mother I wanted to be. What kind of future I wanted for my daughter. The answer, I realized, wasn't about revenge at all. It was about grace. 1 year later, I watched Nora chase butterflies in the park while Marcus set up her birthday picnic nearby. We weren't together. That chapter had ended the day he left the hospital. But we'd found a different kind of peace, one built on careful boundaries and Nora's smile. "Daddy, look," she called, running toward him with cupped hands. I caught one. Marcus knelt beside her, showing her how to open her hands gently to release the butterfly. The sight still caught in my throat sometimes, this version of him so different from the man who'd run away. Lydia appeared with Dr. Bennett, both carrying gift bags. They'd started dating 6 months ago, another unexpected twist in our story. Grace had moved to another firm, but her parting words still echoed. "Sometimes the best revenge is living well." "Mommy, can I open presents now?" Nora bounced between us, her heart strong and steady. "After lunch, sweetie." I caught Marcus's eye across the picnic blanket. "Your dad brought your favorite sandwiches." The word dad no longer tasted bitter. It had taken months of supervised visits, counseling sessions, and watching Marcus fight his own demons before I'd let him earn that title. He'd moved to a smaller law firm, one that specialized in family advocacy. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I have something for you too," Marcus said quietly while Nora was distracted by Lydia's face-painting kit. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a legal document. He was transferring his share of our old house to me. "I know you've been looking for a bigger place," he explained. "Nora deserves a yard, and you deserve to have something that's fully yours." "Marcus." "No strings attached," he added quickly. "I'm not trying to fix the past, just trying to do better in the present." I studied his face, remembering the man who'd chosen his career over his family, who'd run from his fears instead of facing them. That man was still there in the worry lines around his eyes, but something else had grown alongside it. Wisdom, maybe. Or humility. "Thank you," I said finally, tucking the envelope away. Nora ran back to us, her face painted with butterfly wings that matched the real ones still fluttering nearby. She threw her arms around both of us, and for a moment, we were connected by something stronger than our past mistakes. Later, watching her blow out her candles, I realized that revenge hadn't healed us. Forgiveness hadn't either, not really. What had saved us was something messier and more profound. The courage to let go of the family we'd thought we wanted and embrace the complicated, imperfect one we'd become. Sometimes love means knowing when to hold on. Sometimes it means knowing when to let go. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it means learning how to do both at once.